It's time we talk about how going into next season, the Brooklyn Nets are going to be very underrated. And I don't know why nobody's talking about them. First, let's recap what happened during the trade deadline last year, right before the All-Star break. So, as everyone knows, Kevin Durant got traded to the Suns. The Nets traded away Kevin Durant and TJ Warren for Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, 2023 first round, 2025 first round, 2027 first round, and then 2029 first round, and then a couple of second round picks. And then they also traded Kyrie and Markieff Morris. They got Spencer Dinwiddie, they got Dorian Finney-Smith, they got the Mavs 2029 first round pick, and then a couple of second round picks as well. So overall, Nets trade Kyrie and Kevin Durant. They're two perennial all-stars, the best in the business, and they get Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, and a lot of draft picks, a lot of draft capital for them. And by no means were these trades a loss for the Brooklyn Nets. By no means. Mikal Bridges is great. Cam Johnson's great. Spencer Dinwiddie's a great starting/backup point guard, ball distributor. Dorian Finney-Smith is a great 3-and-D type player. And they're going to have so much draft capital for the future. They can either trade that stuff if they want to start winning now, or they can lock in their future, secure their future with draft picks later on. And from my perspective, I think this was more of a win for the Nets than it was for either the Mavs or the Suns. I mean, it might be more of a win for the Suns than the Mavs because Kevin Durant is better. They're most likely going to go heading into next season as the favorites to win the championship, especially now that they got Bradley Beal as well. But by no means is getting Mikal Bridges, who has potential of being a first-time All-Star next year. He is an all-defensive type player. Potential to win Defensive Player of the Year. And let's just go over his stats when he got traded to the Nets last year. He was the number one option. Keep that in mind. He's never been the number one option before, but going into last year, he was the number one. His first time in his career doing so. He averaged 26 points, and this isn't 24 games. He played 24 games for the Nets in the regular season after the trade. He averaged 26 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal, half a block. His defensive numbers went down a little bit, but it's a new system. So him averaging 26 points, that's looking like he can be a number one option going into next year and the future seasons. He's not looking like a role player like he was in Phoenix when he was under Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and Chris Paul. He looks like he's a player who can lead a franchise. And he's not that old either. He's like 27. So going into next year, he's going to be feeling more confident because he knows he has the franchise right now. He knows he's the number one option. He's going to be looking to score. I would not be surprised if his defensive numbers just absolutely skyrocketed because he's going to be in the system more. He's going to know how their defensive scheme works. I wouldn't be surprised if his assist numbers went up. Just every statistic. I don't know if he's going to average 26 points again. I mean, he very well could. Maybe even more. Who knows? And then Cam Johnson. Cam Johnson was the second leading scorer. The top 3 scorers after the trades last year were the people that they traded for, by no surprise. I mean, if you're trading Kevin Durant and Kyrie, I would assume you're getting guys who are going to be your leading scorers because who else are you going to have? But they led the team. Cameron Johnson averaged 17 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. He averaged 1.5 steals. And if Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges are your wing players, your defense is kind of stacked because Cam Johnson is also a very solid defender. And he's a great shooter as well. So you're just spacing the floor. Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson are great shooters, along with Spencer Dinwiddie. And Spencer Dinwiddie averaged 16.3 points. He averaged 10 assists after the trade deadline, and he played 22 games. If he can be your main distributor, that's amazing. Because when he was on the Mavs, it was Luka riding the whole show. And all these guys are going to have chips on their shoulder as well. I haven't even gone into that aspect. Because all these players were they were great role players for their teams. But they're going to have that chip on their shoulder because, like, oh yeah, they traded us away thinking that they're going to do so much better without us. And I think it showed, especially with the Suns. The Suns' defense is absolutely abysmal now that they traded Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson. It just shows how vital they were to the team. Along with the Mavs. The Mavs were, I believe, top 5 in the West before the trade. And after the trade, they didn't even make the playoffs. They traded for Kyrie, and they didn't even make the playoffs because their defense was absolutely horrible. Because Spencer Dinwiddie, he's a solid defensive guard. He averaged 1 steal when he was on the Nets for the 22 games he played. And then Dorian Finney-Smith is a great defender as well. He can go in the paint because he's tall and he's long, and he can play the perimeter. So both teams got absolutely eviscerated from their defensive players, and all of those players are now on the Nets. The Nets are going to be a great defensive team, along with the players that they already have, and Nick Claxton, who was looking like an all-NBA type defensive player. He averaged 1 steal as a center. 1 steal, and he averaged 2.3 blocks. That is amazing. And now that we've talked about defense a little bit, it's time we talk about Ben Simmons. All right? Ben Simmons, I don't think anybody really knows what's up with him, what has been up with him. I mean, he barely played any games last year. In the games he played, he looked kind of shaky. When he did play, he averaged 7 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. He fills the stat sheets. But as I was talking about defense, if Ben Simmons can get to any form that he previously was, their defense is going to be absolutely crazy. Because with their starting five is going to look wild defensively. You put Ben Simmons at the 1. Put Spencer Dinwiddie at the 2. Cam Johnson at the 3 or 4. Mikal Bridges at the 3 or 4. And then Nick Claxton at the 5. All 5 of those players are all NBA type talent defensively. Maybe not Spencer Dinwiddie, but Spencer Dinwiddie's still a great defensive guard on the perimeter. And just think about how long that team is. Because Ben Simmons is a huge point guard. Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson are very long. Nick Claxton is like a 7-footer. I know I've been talking about their defense a lot so far. But I would not be surprised if they were top 5 in defense next year. At all. I would not be surprised at all. And I haven't even talked about their rookies. So the Nets had 2 first-round picks this year. They were back-to-back. They were a little later in the first round, but they picked up Noah Clowney and Dariq Whitehead. Looking back at the draft, I really liked the Dariq Whitehead pick from the Nets. I was really high on him going to the draft. Didn't know much about Noah Clowney, but looking at both, they're both bigger guards. Dariq Whitehead at like 6'6". Noah Clowney, very similar. He's more of a forward, though. They can both stroke it from 3, and they're both great on defense. I just don't know if I can say it enough. The Nets have a very apparent strategy that they're going with next year, and that's long, lanky guard type players who can play defense, especially with the 2 players that they just drafted. And I wouldn't be surprised if Noah Clowney and Dariq Whitehead play very valuable minutes for the Nets next year, because aside from the 5 starters that I've talked about, they lost a couple players. They lost like Seth Curry and a couple others. I mean, along with that, they also have Cam Thomas, who showed that he can get buckets. He's the one player on the Nets who's very not great on defense, I would say, every time he was in. That's the reason he didn't play in the playoffs, even though he scored like 30 a game when he did play, because his defense is just abysmal. He's very streaky too. He's not the most efficient scorer, but he's still only like 21 years old. He's going into his 3rd or 4th season. Cam Thomas could still very well turn out to be a great player. I don't think he's going to start at any point unless someone gets injured next season. But he could be a great... I see him as like a Lou Williams type player, like a great scorer, maybe distributor once he gets a little more developed, like 6-man type player, which would be very valuable for any team. The only thing I worry about with the squad that might put them over the top of other teams, aside from like talent, they're not the most talented team. I think I've addressed that, but they do have chips on their shoulder. They're hard workers. The only thing I worry about that separates them from the other teams is offense. Because if you watch the playoffs last year, you know the reason that they got destroyed by the Sixers because of their offense. Besides Mikal Bridges and occasionally Spencer Dinwiddie, no one was attributing it at all. Their main focus for offense is three-point shooting, I would say, because they're all like 3-and-D type players. And if they're not scoring from three, it's going to be hard. They're going to have to work on their offense a little bit. They're going to have to learn how to, cut to the. I don't know. I'm not a coach. I'm not an offensive guru, but they need to somehow get to the lane more drives, more mid-rangers. As I said, Mikal Bridges doesn't have trouble with any of this. And if Mikal Bridges can maybe learn to distribute a little more and get players open, because I think he's going to have a little bit of a target on his back this year from how he looked at the end of the season and through playoffs. They're going to know he's an offensive player. And I think they're going to recognize that he's their main focal point on offense. They're going to start double teaming him more. So it's going to give him more opportunities to distribute the ball. And I think that's going to be great for the role players. It's going to be great for Noah Clowney and Dariq Whitehead for development. Great for Cam Thomas. Great for Cam Johnson, who's a very good three-point shooter, especially from the corners. Same with Dorian Finney-Smith. It could even help Nicholas Claxton. Because if they're doing like a pick and roll and both guys go to double Mikal, then dump it off to Nick Claxton. And Spencer Dinwiddie can go get you buckets, like I said. And Cam Johnson's been developing that game as well. He's been driving to the bucket more. So they have potential to become dangerous on offense. They're going to be great on defense. They just need to work on the offense a little more, in my opinion. And I haven't even mentioned some of their other role players. Like Jalen Wilson had a very good summer league. I think he's going to be on a 2-way contract, but he could maybe get some minutes this year. Who knows? Lonnie Walker played excellent minutes for the Lakers in the playoffs last year occasionally. They got Dennis Smith Jr. He could do decent. Royce O'Neal, another great 3-and-D type player. The Nets have potential. I see them making the playoffs for sure. I think a lot of people are going to be underestimating the Nets, especially since they got swept last year in the playoffs. But again, I don't even know if the Nets were confident last year. They only had their main star players for 24 tops games, and I don't think they had the chemistry. They weren't a cohesive team. But this year they got the whole offseason. Hopefully they've been playing together, been practicing together. Training camp is going to be vital for the Nets. They're gonna have so much more team chemistry this year. I just think teams are going to be underestimating them. They're going to go far if people aren't careful. The Nets could take any team out on any given night. That's the kind of team that they're going to be next year. A lot of it rides on Ben Simmons. A lot of it rides on if Mikal Bridges can maintain what he did at the end of last year. But I think Mikal Bridges is going to at least average 20, 23, 25 points. At least. I think he will. I think he's going to continue with what he started last year. But like I've been saying, people need to watch out for the Nets. They're going to be a great team next year.